Tozan, a famous Zen master, said, "The blue mountain is the father of the white cloud. The white cloud is the son of the blue mountain. All day long they depend on each other, without being dependent on each other. The white cloud is always the white cloud. The blue mountain is always the blue mountain." Myozan Kodo here from Blue Mountain, White Cloud's Hermitage and Zen Buddhism Ireland. We're continuing our reading of Suzuki Roshi's Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. We're looking this week at the chapter on breathing, chapter 29, or page 29, I should say. The blue mountain and the white cloud. The blue mountain does not want to be the white cloud, and the white cloud does not want to be the blue mountain. We have the solid and the airy, the ephemeral. We have the hard and the soft. We have the heavy and the light. We have the entire dichotomies of existence, the discriminations of the relative realm of reality. But we have more than that. We have, as Thich Nhat Hanh would have it, interbeing. We have the blue mountain and the white cloud depending on each other. So even though they are independent, they are dependent. This is a non-dualistic reality. So what does this have to do with breathing, the chapter on breathing? Well, in zazen, the breath is often an anchor. It's often used to establish practice in the very beginning. Sometimes people are given the task of counting breaths to settle their mind. And then in shikantaza, of course, the breathing is just left to its own devices, to its own natural flowing in and flowing out. But of course the breath is the ultimate in interdependence. We rely moment to moment on breath being available to us, oxygen being given to us by the planet and the trees of the world that provide the oxygen that we need to breathe. So breathing is very much to do with interdependence and the totally dependent web of existence. And Suzuki Roshi obviously sees in this chapter that breathing is profoundly to do with interdependence. When we practice zazen, our mind always follows our breathing. When we inhale, the air comes into the inner world. When we exhale, the air goes out to the outer world. The inner world is limitless, and the outer world is also limitless. We say inner world or outer world, but actually there's just one whole world. So this blue mountain and white cloud are separate and not separate. So even in the realm of the relative and the separate, even in the realm of the discriminating mind, unbeknownst to ourselves, we are already in the absolute reality of Dharma. I suppose Dogen might use an image like a fish in the Genjo Koan, or a bird flying in its element. That even when we think we have lost our way, we are in the midst of absolute reality. When we practice zazen, all that exists is the movement of the breathing, but we are aware of this movement. You should not be absent-minded, but to be aware of the movement does not mean to be aware of your small self, but rather of your universal nature, or Buddha nature. This kind of awareness is very important, because we are usually so one-sided. Our usual understanding of life is dualistic, you and I, this and that, good and bad. But actually, these discriminations are themselves the awareness of the universal existence. I think I was making that point a moment ago. You means to be aware of the universe in the form of you, and I means to be aware of it in the form of I. You and I are just swinging doors. We breathe in, we breathe out. So there's the absolute and the relative, as Nagarjuna would have us, the two truths. But of course, these two truths are totally inseparable. As we see in the Hanya Shinyo, for example, form is emptiness, and emptiness is itself form. It's beautiful here, Suzuki Roshi talking about zazen as well, the timelessness of it, how it is kind of beyond time and space while being in time and space. So when you practice zazen, there's no idea of time or space. You may say, we started sitting at 5:45 in this room, thus you have some idea of time, 5:45, and some idea of space in this room. Actually, what you are doing, however, is just sitting and being aware of the universal activity. That is all. This moment, the swinging door is opening in one direction, and the next moment, the swinging door will be opening in the opposite direction. So, here there is no idea of time or space. Time and space are one. So, this is drawing on Dogen's idea of space-time, that they're inseparable, that to be eating lunch, as Suzuki Roshi says it, is itself 1 o'clock. That time and space are totally a unified element. Kind of prefiguring, in a kind of bizarre way, Einstein's theory of relativity in some ways. Maybe I'm a little naive in that, I'm not a scientist, but I know that Einstein certainly developed the idea of the unity of space and time, but Dogen did this a long time beforehand in his own way. So also Suzuki Roshi is highlighting the natural emergence of the precepts, the ethical within zazen, within the non-discriminating mind of zazen. When we become truly ourselves, we just become a swinging door. We are purely independent of, and at the same time dependent upon everything. Without air, we cannot breathe. Even one of us, each one of us is in the midst of myriads of worlds. We are in the center of the world always, moment after moment. So we are completely dependent and independent. If you have this kind of existence, you have absolute independence. You will not be bothered by anything. So when you practice zazen, your mind should be concentrated on your breathing. This kind of activity is the fundamental activity of the universal being. Without this experience, this practice, it is impossible to attain absolute freedom. So the breathing is absolutely central, and to the practice of zazen. Suzuki Roshi has already talked about the posture. The other incredibly important element in zazen to get right is the breath, and then the mind, which he goes on to talk about next. The breath is our anchor. It brings us to our settled position in zazen. It is natural, it is unmanipulated, it is as it is. It is the independent organism of I breathing, and the I set aside in the interdependence of the available breath. So breathing is the blue mountains, and breathing is the white clouds. And this is the fundamental non-duality of the state of zazen, of shikantaza, of allowing things to go, to course on their way, moment by moment, totally part of what we are, and we totally part of what it is. We standing aside, and it standing aside, being totally independent and dependent, being in absolutely saturated and at the center of absolute reality, while being in our relative corporeal space and time, but what being beyond space and time at the same time. So this zazen, this practice enlightenment that Dogen talks about, has at its center the breath, which is the great anchor in zazen. And when we wander, we can use that breath to come back to. And the breath itself, from our very first and until our very last, is with us all the while. Why wasn't the heartbeat, which is with us all the while, taken as the object of meditation? Because the breath in some ways is more profound. It is non-dualistic. It has within it the teaching of I and other, of self and the myriad things, of dependence and interdependence. So, okay, well, let's leave our reading of the chapter, the very short chapter on breathing, at that for this week, from Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, and we'll move on to looking at the next chapter, which has to do with control after that, and then onto mind waves after that. So thank you for your attention, and if you want to contact me, you can email me at myozankodo@gmail.com, myozankodo@gmail.com, or you can look up the Zen Buddhism Ireland Facebook group and drop me a message there, or in Blue Mountain White Clouds Hermitage, where I'm one of the priests there as well. Just look it up online, you'll find it. So thank you so much for your attention.